Hey guys, today we're going to talk about Resident Evil. We're going to talk about the different aspects of the game on a level of art and society and the impact that it's had in the culture of video gaming, because it's a pretty important game if you think about it.
Of course it is, yeah.
And it's a good game to choose for the Halloween season. So to begin with, let's start with the basic story. The STARS Alpha team goes to investigate some recent reports in the Arclay Mountain, and they land, and then they're attacked by a dog. It's a pretty vicious looking dog, to be fair.
I think they're base model after Doberman Pinscher, correct?
I don't know. Cujo, maybe?
Yeah, Cujo. yes.
Cujo meets Two-Face. Okay, but essentially they're attacked by this dog, which is a monster, and they go running to the nearby mansion, and inside they have to survive the mansion. First off, let's be honest with ourselves here on something. We know for a fact Alone in the Dark came before, which is usually, first off, Resident Evil is always credited with creating the survival horror genre. And it's Alone in the Dark that's usually, you always get that one person, no, Alone in the Dark came first. But let's be honest, Resident Evil perfected it and put it on the map. Some of the things one of the big things it's known for, right off the bat, let's get right to it, the one thing everyone hates about it is the controls.
I don't think the controls are that bad. I think the more or less thing that really bums me out about that game is having to fix camera angles. Mm-hmm. Let's say you're like in the one corner and the camera angle's not set. You're getting attacked by a zombie or a zombie coming up behind you. You can't see it. So it has that suspenseful.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of what the camera's for? Is to kind of add the suspense to it?
Yeah, it is.
And they say that the controls, the tank controls, are meant to be there because it's meant to. Okay, how is it going to mess you up if those things come out and scare you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is what it's meant to do.
If originally I recall, this was an arcade game, wasn't it?
Actually, funny enough, I got some history here that I want to talk about. Let's go ahead and segue, and we'll bounce back and forth between the two subjects. Originally, it began as a remake of the NES title Sweet Home, which is based off a Japanese horror film. It started off as a first-person shooter. There's actually one photo online that's leaked of it as a first-person shooter. You could probably find it if you want. Then what happened is I believe it's Mikami who made it, if I'm correct, right? Is that his name? Shinji Mikami?
I believe
Shinji Mikami.
I believe how you pronounce it, yes.
Yes, Shinji Mikami. He said it just wasn't up to snuff, so that's when they went to the third-person view with the pre-rendered backdrops. All right. Early on, there were two characters that weren't in the original product, the final product, and that is it's a black comedian-like character. He was described more as kind of an Eddie Murphy type. And then there was a big cyborg-type character who, at one point, would hold up the collapsing roof of the mansion. They were eventually turned into Rebecca and Barry. Kind of a long stretch. They went from a thin black guy to a small white girl.
Yeah, but at the same time, there was like some steroid freak that can hold up ceilings from collapsing, like whatever you're saying. So I think it's more realistic what they did.
Well, the one thing that people like to poke fun at is, first off, the dialogue and the look of the game. I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's a product of its time. I think a lot of people, they try to come out, well, that's B-movie. Yeah, they came out and said that it was inspired by B-movies, but let's be honest. It wasn't inspired by B-movies till after it came out.
Let's face it, most games back in the day, dialogue wasn't really the main focus. Storytelling nowadays in video games are basically a new thing. Mm-hmm. People did not start investing hard time into actual campaign or storylines until literally 2003, 2004.
No, and I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think if you look at Resident Evil, the original, this game was released in '96. And let's be honest, it's a pretty tightly made, focused game.
For its time?
Yes. And if you go beyond, you're right, this was uncharted territory. Absolutely. And you look at what do? They bring it, in fact, I think they even recorded in English in Japan. I think only recently they starting to record the dialogue in Japanese. These are Japanese guys writing this English dialogue, and it's a struggle, I can imagine, to find that tone that's actually appropriate. I think personally, it's bad dialogue, but it's not bad dialogue in the sense that, oh my god, it's so terrible. It's a product of its time. It's literally it's a benchmark. And bring up the remake, where I think personally the dialogue is much better. And I'll have people argue with me all the time that it's still cheesy, but I still think that when you look at the dialogue of the original and the tone of it, it's an underlying creepiness that I don't think, even in that own franchise, I still don't think they managed to capture. Sense.
Honestly, until the actual films itself came into its own, it's telling an actual backstory on the whole entire Umbrella Corporation, that's when the games actually picked up steam as far as storytelling went. Because they took a cue from the film, not so much the games themselves. People think it's vice versa, but it's not, because the in-depth story was actually told on the cinematic screen versus the actual video game screen. And then they started drawing from that to help fill in the gaps, so to speak, that they've been lacking for over the past 10 years. So, to me, I think that it just needs more. You know what I mean? Like, to be honest, the video game franchise has done well just because of the cult following with it.
Like, well, here's interesting. Is it really a cult following when it sells as well as it does? It's not doing Call of Duty 8 million in one day, but it's still doing 5 to 6 million copies. I mean, it's not selling only 500,000.
I would consider that a cult following.
Would you really?
Because the thing is, if it's hot like a Call of Duty franchise title, they would drop like millions in a day. Honestly, like, people pick up that franchise. There's the diehard fans, and then there's people who's like, hey, I've played Resident Evil 4. It's like, I'm kind of a fan of it. I'll pick it up just because I know this will be a consistent game for me.
But how many games really do drop 8 million in one day? If that's the limit, if that's the bar,
Grand Theft Auto 5.
You've got two. You've got 2 games that do it. That means every other game is a cult following.
You can't compare that to Grand Theft Auto 5.
I know you can't compare it,
They
but
broke all records when they made $1 billion in under 24 hours.
Right, I understand, but Grand Theft Auto, the first one, came out around that time as well. So, and then you had the original Silent Hill as well. So there's always that start of the franchise that will expand to something bigger and greater as time goes on. Better graphics, different engines to run things on, and they just really have to pump everything into a new game and really push it out there, but not release it too fast, because that's when you start to lose that following that you once gained.
Now I want to get back to this though, because again, I played this when I was 11. That was my first time playing it. This was actually my first third-dimensional game. I was playing.
Scared the fuck out of me.
Yeah, it's a frightening game. It really is. And people, it's not cheesy once you start playing it. Once you start going through the mansion halls, you're in it. You know what I mean? And I think that, personally, I go back, and I was playing it recently, actually, and I was amazed at just not how tight it was. Gameplay was tight. You know what I mean? It was very tight, very focused. It didn't add more elements than needed, They laid out everything that you had to know at the beginning of the game, gameplay-wise, and they just pushed it from there. They don't keep throwing a bunch of crap at you gameplay-wise. They don't throw new gameplay mechanics by the end. Everything's laid out at the beginning, and they build upon it. And I think it's amazing because, one, I feel like, for story-wise, it doesn't have the same basic Japanese issues where, well, it's not really an issue, it's just the Japanese culture of where they just throw a bunch of stuff at you story-wise, and they don't really care about it in the sense that, is it logical or does it make sense? It's, okay, is it going to scare people, or or how is it playing to people? That's just their culture, that's how they tell their stories, nothing wrong with it. But, I was amazed at how simple the story is. I like the fact that there's a scientific backdrop. I think it's ingenious that as you go through this mansion, you find all these notes. All right, I do. I think it builds upon the horror. It adds character to not just the scenario, but to the mansion and the people that inhabited it.
It really adds more depth to the story when you go around and finding these notes and try to piece the puzzle together.
Yes, absolutely. All right, I think that's going to be ending it right now for the first video on this one. We'll pick up actually right where we left off on the second video. All right?
Guys, stay tuned.